Good afternoon. My name is David Knox, and I have an interesting article on MSA. So, make this really easy. Um, the Movement Disorder Society criteria for the diagnosis of MSA has evolved over the years. I think there's one in 2008 and 2000 in the teens, and now it's been completely rewritten for the most part, the 2022 version. And this is what we go by to see if you actually have MSA. And this, well, let me take that back. This is what they're wanting the doctors to go by so they can better diagnose MSA quicker, sooner when they see doctors, right? No more going from doctor to doctor. This is the criteria. So if you have MSA, you look at diagnostic criteria like this, and some doctors are old school, some doctors are not. They're new school, and a lot of doctors still have differing opinions, even though they're reading the same consensus across the medical, family, across the whole nation, right, or the whole world. So I copy and pasted this to a document, just a Google Doc to make it easy, and I highlighted things that I have for sure. I put some things in italics that I'm not sure what they're talking about, but I think that's true. And there's really 4 sets. So if I go up here, we see right now at the top of this, there's 4 different diagnostic certainties. So the first one, which is not highlighted, neuropathologically established, you're dead, and then you have a hot cross sign, a hot cross symbol on your brain. That's really what that comes down to. Okay, so let's get rid of the first one. Right, nobody's gonna, find out the hard way, right? So, the last one, possible prodromal, is we're not sure, but you have some unusual symptoms that we need to look into. Clinically probable and clinically established are basically, after you have so many of these symptoms, they can definitively say, oh, you've got to have it. Even though we can't do a biopsy and see your brain until after death, right? You have to have it. You fit all the signs, right? And probable means like that's probably the leading cause of any disease that's out there. What you have, there's still just a little bit of doubt. So it does change. So let's go down to the last one, prodromal, right? Prodromal. Now, again, you don't have to fit a few criteria for this one. First of all, it's got to be over 30 years old. Check. 43, very young, 43. You have to have a proven RBD, right? REM behavior disorder. I got that one. I got videos and videos of that one, punching everything and talking and, welling your arms and stuff. I don't have orthostatic hypertension, at least not that can be proven. Urogenital failure, right? Erectile dysfunction in males under the age 60, because, if you're up in age, then that's almost a normal thing for men. So that's one, too. I have that, fortunately. But it says also with at least one unexplained voiding difficulties, right? Pulse urinary. Now, this is saying a certain volume, right? That's a whole nother story, which you got to get specific tests, though. But I fit that, especially with one doctor and what I say too. So, there are some tests for this. And the last time I went to the Mayo, it actually came back as, emptying out was pretty normal. But I have another test up in May that's going to actually prove this. So, today is another example. Yesterday, I didn't have any problems with urinary incontinence, and today I do. So, it's these off and on symptoms sometimes that are hard to track. It says at least one of the following subtle Parkinsonian signs. Check, right? Tremors and gait, there's a lot of things that go into that. And subtle cerebellar signs. So, the slurring of the words is definitely one of those. There are some other things you'll see up above that plays into the cerebellar. Quite different, the symptoms. There's just a few overlapping, but they're very different. So, and then you go down to exclusion criteria. Obviously, if you have unexplained anosmia, right? Cardiac sympathetic imaging would attest that. Fluctuating cognitive or pronounced variation, recurrent visual hallucinations. Visual hallucinations it's not medicine, it's something else. Dementia, right? You got nightmares, you got hallucinations. These things are quite different. Dementia, can't be MSA. Down gaze, supranuclear, like PSP, right? Showing verticals, that's what they're looking for, basically PSP. brain MRI suggestive of other things, right? MS, vesicular Parkinsonism, sympathetic cerebellar disease, right? SCD, and then documentation of a different look-alike condition. So this is very basic, saying if you got these couple, you're probably in the right group. We just have to rule out some look-alikes, right? Rule out being old, rule out having chemical stuff wrong with you, chemical poisoning, lead poisoning, stuff like that, and then not some look-alike diseases. That's what they're trying to say here. And then we go up to the top here, and we'll start with the clinical probable, right? So that's the next one up, saying, we're pretty close to thinking it has to be MSA, but we're not sure, right? Besides death. So at least 2 of the following core features, right? So autonomic dysfunction, mine hasn't been proved yet, right? Which, again, there's more tests for that, but I have unexplained voiding difficulties. That's absolutely true. Unexplained urinary urge incontinence, I do. I'm not going to talk much about that. Orthostatic hypotension, again, I would say yeah, but it hasn't been proven yet. Today's a good example of that, which that's for another video. And at least one of the following. So I have every test, every doctor says you have Parkinsonisms, right? You look like Parkinson's, even though you're not manifesting, everything's not matching Parkinson's disease. And then also I add in there cerebral syndrome. So at least one of gait ataxia, right? My ability not to walk properly, left, right, drunkenness, basically. Limb ataxia, not being able to, touch your finger to noses and stuff like that, right? Now I don't have it in my hands, but sure enough, if you go down to the legs, that's a tough one. So I'm throwing the limb ataxia, not because of hands, right? And even if I go to my left hand, which is usually the worst in the right, it's still okay. But it's definitely my legs that are way farther with this, right? I don't have any issues with voices for the most part, and oculomotor, eyes. I do have some voice issues when the tremor gets crazy. My voice gets low and shaky. But that's not a main feature. I'm just ruling that one out. And it says at least one of the supportive motor or non-motor markers, right? So for MRI marker, it's not required. It's pretty general, pretty open. So you need to add in at least one motor or non-motor. So these things down here at the bottom. Rapid progression within 3 years of motor onset. Yeah, it's 5 times faster than Parkinson's. My stuff's going quick, right? I don't really have posture instability, not that I know of. Craniocervical dystonia, I don't have that. Severe speech impairment, within 3 years, I met in italics. I'm speaking more and more drunk. The more you watch the videos, you'll notice my inability to connect thoughts and words. You'll see me slurring. I'll start talking about sentences, and then I can't finish them because I can't find a word. I can't spit it out. So I'll start a whole nother topic. If you actually go back to the last video I did yesterday, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about now that I mentioned it. But I'm putting that into maybe just because I'm good at talking. I talk all day, right? Dysphagia within 3 years. I don't have that unexplained. I don't have that. Jerky, myoclonic postural kinetic tremor. That's a kinetic tremor. That's literally, right? And that jerky movements. That's what I'm talking about. Like these, not being able to connect the leg goes, how too much kicking, too less kicking, too much reaching, too little. The body's not going where it's supposed to. That's what I'm talking about. I don't have postural deformities. I have scoliosis, that counts, but it's not from MSA. It's not from this. It's from a kid, right? Strider, walking, respiratory size. I don't sigh when I'm talking about just random, like, right? Cold discolored hands, feet. I have had discoloration in my feet. Every time I go to doctors, they ask me when I take off my socks, are my feet normally that color? My wife would attest to it. Not horribly like you're thinking about, but they look like they're lacking oxygen for sure. And my hands and feet are always cold, especially my feet, always cold. Don't matter under the covers or top of the covers. ED, we've already talked about, and pathological laughter or crying. Not really. Okay. And the other thing it says here, MRI marker, right? So the next one will go up to the highest we can get besides autopsying the brain and cutting it open after death. The highest one we can get is clinically established MSA. So again, core clinical features are autonomic dysfunction defined with at least one of the following, right? So unexplained voiding difficulties, right? I have that. Trust me, it'll be proven in the next trip. Unexplained urinary urge incontinence. I don't know how you test for that. Sounds like a nerve ending issue, right? How do you test for that? I mean, I absolutely have that without, I could care less what test you do. That is it. That's not a normal thing, right? So, I mean, there's two right there, but definitely one diehard thing I have, at least one of the others. So I have a very poor response to Parkinson, levodopa. I don't react to it. Cerebral syndrome, right, with leaks two, gait ataxia and limb ataxia. Again, those are the two. You know, it's even if we cut this off, cerebral syndrome, because maybe a limb with the legs, let's say that don't count, I don't react to levodopa, and you only need one of them. So, you know, throw it in there how you want to. It still fits the criteria. And then at least two motor or non-motor features, two of them, right? So if you go down to motor, non-motor, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, without a doubt. And then there's another one with severe speech impairment within 3 years, right? The question is, how severe is severe? Do I have to be mumbling to make that severe? Right? That's the question I have to ask somebody, right? So you can ask my wife and even my mom and stuff. It's when I have issues speaking, it's you can tell it right away. Even when I'm at stores today or you know, ordering pierogies today, I'm talking so drunk. I can tell. I'm trying not to sound like I'm drunk, but it's kind of hard to. And then MRI marker right here is at least one. So MRI marker could be a lot of atrophy, right? Shrinkage of the brain, the putamen, caudate, stuff like that. We haven't seen that on my brain scans, at least not yet. I'm right at 2 years, so it might be too early, might not have it, who knows. But I do have the negative or the abnormal DAT scan, which shows, I don't know, not sure if it's even on here, but it shows, yeah, right. So right here, MRI markers are clinically established MSA. Those markers would be each affected brain region as evidenced by either atrophy or increased diffusivity count. So I had to look up the diffusivity to see exactly what they're getting at. Diffusion is the transfer of heat, and that's not really what we're talking about for the brain. What we're talking about is the transfer of data, or in my case, right, they keep talking about the tracer, the trace mark. So what they're talking about is the transfer of data. Is you, like, remember my scan I had, is your putamen actually sending signals, right? My MRI said it had absence, my DAT scan, the absence of activity. It's not sending anymore. There's no signals diffusing to the rest of the brain, to the body, to work. So that's what that's talking about, from what I understand anyway. So atrophy of the putamen, I don't have atrophy. We don't see it shrinking, but we see it not working. Completely not, 0% not working, right? I don't have a hot cross bun sign because you only get those after death or at the very end. It's very hard you rarely see those on someone who's alive. Just scratch that out. You got to be so far along to see that. And then the increased diffusivity of the putamen, right? So that's what I'm talking about that I have, what's proven. So there is a whole bunch of unexplained exclusion criteria, you know, things that I don't have, okay? And this, again, this is from the Movement Disorder Society. They are the premier people for diagnostic criteria for movement disorders, and of that is MSA, obviously. So, you know, I'll keep it under 15 minutes. I'll try to talk as fast as I can. Short, simple, sweet. I'll try to put a link of this into the channel. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys. Love you to death. Give me a like, subscribe if you haven't, tell your friends. The more we spread this, the better. See you next video. Have a good one.